an internet age. We're living in a social media age. In fact, most of the social media platforms like Twitter, which has about 500 million and counting members, Facebook has about 1 billion users. This is the world we're living in, and we cannot escape it. And so that is why we have decided to talk about internet and social media addiction, because it is the world that we're living in. So just as I usually do, we're going to start with a definition. We're going to define what internet and social media addiction is. So if you have your notes and your notebooks and you want to write this down, this will help us in our discussion today. So what is internet social media addiction? It is 3 things. It is the problematic, using something incorrectly. So problem, the word problem is there. Problematic, something that is not quite right. Problematic, number 1. 2, compulsive. Do you remember when we talked about mental health and we discussed anxiety? Those of you who are here. So compulsive means out of anxiety, nervousness, compulsion. So there's no reason for you to check your phone, but under compulsion, you have this anxiety, you have this nervousness. That's compulsion. So compulsive means using something out of anxiety, fear, and we'll talk about FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. That's under the compulsive definition. So we have problematic, compulsive, and overuse. That should give us another indicator. Remember when we talked about abuse? So we can actually abuse not people, but media. So that's our definition. It's the problematic, compulsive, and overuse of social media platforms or of the internet. So those are the 3 things. Either it's problematic, it's compulsive, or overuse of social media. Now, you may be looking at me and saying, how do I know I have internet or social media addiction? It is when you're using these platforms at the cost of, or to the detriment of, fulfilling your daily life activities. What do I mean? It means using your phones, your tablets, your internet, being online, WhatsApp, Facebook, at the cost of going to school, working, interacting with your family, taking care of yourself, and the lives that we live. Now, internet and social media life is a virtual life. It interacts with the real life, but it's a virtual life. So there's a tendency for people who are addicted to social internet media to think that the virtual life is really the life that we ought to live. So they'll do that at the expense of the real life that we live. What do I mean? It means that we spend so many hours on Facebook thinking we're productive, but really we have daily obligations we need to fulfill as human beings. Going to work, going to school, cooking for our families, watching over our children. Those are functions that we all need to do. So if you use internet or social media to a point where you cannot fulfill your obligations, your responsibility as an adult or as a child, we'll talk about children, that is what internet and social media addiction is all about. It's an addiction. Just like any addiction. In fact, the elder was saying he remembers there's a time when our concern as society was on alcohol and drugs and the effects of it. Did you know that internet and social media addiction also has effects? Let's look at some effects. To overuse social media or to be addicted to it will cause a number of psychological problems. For example, anxiety. Being anxious. For example, let's assume you're on Twitter. Because Twitter is a very interactive platform. And I'm not explaining these platforms because I'm assuming that we all know them and I want us to save some time. But for example, Twitter, where it's literally second by second updates, someone who, and I used to use Twitter, by the way, I've used all these platforms, so I'm not talking as if I have no social media addiction. I've actually had a social media addiction previously. So I can remember the days that I used to be on Twitter and I used to be addicted to Twitter. There was always an anxiety that if I don't check Twitter, and how Twitter is you have the updates, so it's like Facebook, you have the updates but no other content. If you scroll, for example, it will show you the updates, let's assume 50 or 100 updates within a minute. Then the page will scroll up and it will go to the next minute. So if you are not on Twitter in that minute, in that span of time, you've missed out. So I remember when I was on Twitter, it was always, I have to check Twitter, I have to check. Because once that post is gone, it's gone. Or, it's not really gone, you can scroll and look for it, but who wants to do that? So that's where the anxiety comes from. Let's assume Facebook. Facebook is another interesting one. The need to post, the need to update your status. If you don't, some people feel anxious. I need to tell people I'm in camp meeting. I need to tell people I'm dressing this way. I need to tell people I need to check in. That may cause some anxiety for people. Depression. You can actually get depression from social media. And I'm going to talk about, there's a theory called social comparison theory, in which we compare ourselves to others, either upward or downward. So for example, let's use Facebook for an example. For example, if we had a youth yesterday, I was with the youth class, we're talking about dating and getting prepared for marriage. If I'm a youth, and if every time I go on Facebook, I'm seeing wedding pictures, and I'm comparing my social status with the person who has posted wedding pictures, I may feel really depressed. As we know, life on social media is fabricated. It's not real. That's why I said it's a virtual life. It's not a real life. So there's a tendency, especially for Facebook, for people to put the pretty pictures, they'll put pictures with filters, they'll put Photoshop, they'll only post the highlights of their life. But as we know, life isn't always happy, life isn't always perfect, but when you go online, that is what you see. So especially for youth, there's this tendency to judge yourself based on what you're seeing online. And online life is not real. So people can start to suffer from depression. Why is my life not moving forward? Why am I not happy like that person on Facebook? Facebook is not real. They're showing a distorted view on life. Life has highs and life also has lows. But Facebook, it's only highs, right? And I'm using Facebook as an example. Loneliness. The interesting thing about this, and researchers have tried to understand this, is even though social media connects all of us, so for example, if you have friends in Australia, or if you have children in the UK or India, you don't have to go to those places. For example, apps like WhatsApp, you can actually talk to people from all over the world, and that is wonderful because it has made us a global village. However, that may be in replacement of actually forming real bonds and relationships. In fact, people who study relationships say that relationship is not just the words we use. There are all these non-verbal elements, like interacting with each other, being in the same physical space. So how we form relationships now with social media is very, very different from maybe previous years. So you will hear this a lot, especially, let me talk to parents for a minute. You'll hear this a lot from your children. I'm lonely. I don't have that many friends. Or you'll see your children in their rooms a lot, not interacting with other children, not making friends. Why? Because social media can tend to isolate someone. They will make the person think their life is all on that phone. But our lives are not restricted to phones, right? And so that lack of interaction that we used to have growing up, that's now been replaced with phones, tablets, and etc. So don't think if you give your phone or tablet to your child, they're fulfilling their social development. They're not. Children need to still go out, play with other children, form real life relationships, and not just online types of relationships. We talked about ADD or ADHD, when we talked about our mental health segment. Remember I talked about anxiety, and I said there's a disorder called attention hyperactivity disorder or attention deficit disorder, ADD, in which the person has a hard time concentrating. So people with ADD or ADHD, what do? you're having a conversation with this person, then all of a sudden the person has changed the topic. So for example, let's assume I'm teaching this segment on internet and social media addiction. If I have ADD, all of a sudden I'm talking about the weather, all of a sudden the weather is really nice, then I move on to, look at the trees out there, the trees are growing really well, to, the chairs are blue. There's no logic to how that conversation is happening. Why is that? Because in the mind, the person's mind has moved so fast and it's not able to pay attention, it's not able to concentrate on any length of time. So people who use internet and social media, because this is real time, it's a fast form of communication, they have a hard time concentrating. Now, what does that mean to us? It means that, especially for children, when you expose them at a very young age to all these forms like video games and etc., when they go to school, they really, really struggle concentrating. And it's not an issue, and especially let me talk to teachers for example. Teachers, if you have a classroom and you're doing a lecture and you notice there's a child not paying attention, it may not be that they're a bad child or they're ill-disciplined. It may actually be they're suffering from ADD. They can't concentrate. Even if they tried, they couldn't, because their brain now has been rewired and those signals are going so fast, they can't sit still, they can't pay attention, and that sometimes is caused by early exposure to social media and etc. FOMO. Fear of missing out. It's a real thing. Like here we are in camp meeting, you're sitting there looking at me, but I know some of you are thinking, what's happening on WhatsApp? What's happening on Facebook? What's happening on Twitter? What am I missing out? It's a real thing. It's called fear of missing out. If I don't check Facebook, I won't know about something. If I don't check Twitter, I'll miss out information. If I don't go to my WhatsApp group, I'll not get an update. So that fear can make someone not pay attention, may not enjoy their life, because they keep thinking, I need to check my phone, I need to check my phone, I need to check my phone. That's a real thing. So that may make people preoccupied with other things and not necessarily enjoy their life. I was exposed to social media, I think about the end of high school, because Facebook didn't really come out until I was in high school, and the high school I went to were not allowed technology at all. So I really didn't get engaged into social media until about the end of high school. And then when I went to the university, that's really when I started to embrace social media. And I remember, because I was studying abroad, there were not many Kenyans, there were not many Africans like myself, I felt very isolated. And I remember I used to use social media, literally it was, I wake up, Facebook. Go to the shower, Facebook. Go to class, Facebook. Even sometimes in class, Facebook. That was my life. And I remember reaching a point about second year when I was like, wow, this is literally controlling my life. I remember even being in class or being somewhere and thinking, and literally getting a panic attack, thinking, oh my goodness, I've not checked Facebook. It literally used to run my life. So as I'm saying, I've actually gone through internet and social media addiction, and I know it's a real phenomena. So and that's why I want to share with you some steps in which you can recover. I can say I'm a recovering social media addict. My life is no longer controlled by Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So I'm going to share with you some practical things that you can do to gain control over your life. Because really, you can hand your life over to Facebook. You can hand your life over to WhatsApp, and you can literally be very, very unfulfilled. Your life can literally go on without you enjoying it. So I want to return the happiness and control over your life by knowing how to deal with these social media issues. There are other effects, like sleep. Are you getting your 8 hours of sleep? Here's a good example. When do you have a bedtime? Parents, do you have a bedtime in your household? Do you say by 10 o'clock everyone in this household is asleep? And not just in their bed, because this is something that we do. Especially, I remember I used to do this a lot. Let's say my bedtime is 10, yeah? You enter the bed. What do you do in bed? You're on your phone. Hello? So even though you're in bed, you're not sleeping. And you might be on your phone for like another 2 or 3 hours. So you're actually cutting back on the amount of sleep you need to be able to function. You're not getting quality sleep. So as you set parameters in your families, you can actually say, okay, phones off, not even lights off, phones off by this time. You guard your space for sleep because we need sleep in order for our brain and our body to function. So you can do that. Another thing that is really good for families, setting parameter on family time. So if you're having time in your families, say this is going to be a no IT time or no phone time. For example, with meals, you can say breakfast, because we're having breakfast as a family, everyone put off their phone. Respect the time that we have together, because you may be together. I think last time we traveled with my mother, and we like to do this a lot. We like to look at people and, and laugh and talk about them because we're sinners saved by grace, amen? So we were somewhere on holiday, and I remember we were looking at this family, and it was father, mother, and about 3 or 4 children. Every person was on their phone. Now, was that family time? No, they were not interacting, they were not communicating together. So families, nowadays, you cannot just say, we're with our children, we're having fun. They're not having fun. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram. They're not interacting with you. You may need to say, no phones off. Or if you're going to up country, you're going for holiday, you can actually say, everyone bring your phone. And you can actually all put your phones together, lock them up somewhere and say, we're actually going to spend time together. And that's really where you can start to take that control so that you're interacting. What goes on social media? Good things and bad things. Of course, I'm highlighting some of the good, but also the negative things I want you to be aware of. For girls, if you have a girl, you need to be really conscious by the types of messages that are on social media. As I told you, social media is not real life. It's fabricated lives. So there's some platforms like Instagram or Pinterest where ladies take photos of themselves, and appropriate photos, of course, but the image of that body is distorted. And you can do this on social media. You can put filters, you can remove defects, you can actually make someone look slimmer and bigger. So when girls are growing up and they're exposed to these messages, it can actually harm their self-image. They may try to distort their bodies based on what they're seeing online. For example, they may see pictures of women with very thin waists and very large hips. That's really not in reality for a woman's body. But these girls will grow up thinking, I need to have the perfect body. My skin needs to be perfect. My hair needs to be this long. Where are they getting those messages from? Social media. So if you have girls and they're being exposed to these things, as parents, you want to affirm to them, no, a woman's body can be very different. It doesn't have to look this way. You don't have to be perfect. If your child, for example, we're talking about girls, if your girls start using makeup at a young age, more likely than not, they're being exposed to social media. Because when they look online and they see a model with perfect skin, no pimples, no blemishes, that is what is making them try to use makeup, because they want to look like those models. And I'm not saying makeup is bad. I'm saying we're talking about self-esteem, confidence. So the girls will say, I can't leave the house without putting makeup, because they believe their beauty is not the way God has created us. It's what social media says we ought to look like. So I want you to know, body image, a lot of girls who suffer from eating disorders like anorexia, bulimia, girls who try these weight loss programs or even plastic surgery, excessive use of makeup, where is that coming from? It's from social media. Because the images there are not real. These models, they distort them a lot to look nice on social media. Mood swings also come from social media. You're happy when, for example, let me give the example of Facebook. I told you I'm a recovering addict. So in my addict days, when I used to be on Facebook literally every hour of the day, I remember my mood would be determined by how many likes or shares. Hello, am I talking to myself? I know there are many people here. My mood would be determined by how many likes I got on a post on social media. So for example, if I posted a picture or a status update and 10 people liked it, I remember thinking, what's wrong with myself? People don't like me, I'm a horrible person. And my mood would go down. If I'd get like 50 likes or 100 likes, depending on how many friends, my mood would go up. So they've actually done research to see the relationship between how many likes you have on Facebook versus your mood. And when you notice your mood is changing by how many people follow you, how many people like you, how many people have shared with you, there's an addiction going on. And you need to cut that. Your value is not determined by how many people like you on social media. And of course, we know a like is not a real like in reality, right? There's more to relationships than that. Withdrawals. So, for example, how many of you would be happy leaving your phone in the house for the whole day? Only 3 people. Hello? Yeah? Some of you even thinking, now where is my phone? I put it in the handbag, it's not even in the handbag, yeah? You're freaking out. Those are withdrawals. I need my phone near me. I need to have my phone in my handbag. I need it in my pocket. Where is my phone? Those are withdrawals. Because every time you try to separate from that gadget, you start to feel anxious. You start to think, something's going on. I don't know about it. That's part of the addictive cycle. And of course, conflict. How many of us know of relationships that are broken because of Facebook? All of us know. Marriages have been broken because of Facebook. Relationships. People have lost jobs because of things they're putting on Facebook. That's real. Right? And people will go online and say, hey, I didn't know you were having an affair. Or they'll go online and say, hey, I didn't know you're a drunkard. Or they'll go online and say, hey, I didn't know this about you. So people may actually start to judge people in reality because of what they're posting online. And so I always say this to my students, and I say this in forums all the time. Watch what you put online. Especially youth, because we're looking for jobs, yeah? Watch what you put online. Nowadays, employers are going to your Facebook page. They're going to Google you online because they want to be able to determine the kind of person you are. So actually now we're making judgments of people based on stuff we put online. Watch what you put online. This used to be my rule back in my addict days. I always used to tell myself, what I'm about to post, if my pastor saw that, hello, would I be comfortable posting that? That always used to be my standard. And young people, you need to have a standard. If your parents saw this on Facebook, would that be something appropriate? Try to see. Don't put things online and then now you're upset when people start to have conflict with you or have concerns about you. Because of course that is a reflection of what's going on in your life and etc. Be careful what you're putting on online. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about social media? Do you have urges? Do you post your personal problems? Especially Facebook. Some people use Facebook like a personal diary. I woke up today, bad mood. Breakfast, nilikula uji. Nimefika camp meeting. Nimeketi ndani. Kuna daktari, I don't know, msichana, anasema social media. Hello. It's like a diary, yeah? That's not the purpose of social media. And if that's the case, maybe you need a friend. Hello? You don't need social media. You need someone to share with. Okay. We talked about being restless and all of that. So, let's talk about healing. I had to go through a healing phase as a young person. I told you about second year in university. I realized this is taking over my life. I will wake up one day as an old woman and say, what happened to my life? I spent it all on Facebook. So I had to make a decision. I had to recognize I am addicted to social media. That's really the first step in healing. Being able to say, I have a problem. WhatsApp runs my life. Facebook runs my life. Everything online is running my life. Actually being able to take that responsibility and saying there's a problem. That's really step number one. Step number one, recognizing you have a problem. Then, you need, and this is where a lot of addictions are similar. Whether it's social media or alcohol or whatever, they're all similar. Because what happens is we now lose boundaries. Yeah? Every hour you have to be on Facebook, really? No, not necessarily. You have to check Facebook when you wake up? Not necessarily. You have to check WhatsApp before you go to sleep? Not necessarily. So the first step in healing is to recreate boundaries in your life. Because literally, social media is running your life. So you need to start pushing back the amount of time you're using on social media. Now, a really good thing, and I'm not promoting products or apps or platforms or anything like that. I just want to make a disclaimer. But a really good thing I've seen especially for iPhones, I'm not sure Androids have this, but in iPhones, there's actually, if you go to settings, and I think there's an option that says screen time, it actually shows you how much time you're spending per app. And it will actually show you how many hours a day you're spending on your phone. So if you're not aware how much time you're using, you can actually download an app if you don't have it. I know iPhones have it for sure. It will actually tell you 8 hours online, 6 hours on Facebook, 1 hour on WhatsApp, another hour on Messenger. It will actually show you how many hours you're spending on each of these things. That's the first step. How much time are you spending? And you might be shocked. You may be spending more time than you think. So, how much time do you want to apportion to social media? It's part of life. It's part of life. And for me, I had to make some decisions and say, okay, I'm in school, because I was in school at the time, I'm no longer in school. I used to say this, okay, I'm going to apportion, let's say, 2 hours. And that's very little, by the way. It's not even, it's like a fraction of what I used to do. I say, okay, I'm going to portion 2 hours of my day on social media. And I'll actually make times for it. So for example, lunchtime between 12 and 1, that's my social media time. But I cannot check social media again outside that time. We're talking about boundaries. You may say something like, I'm not using social media on Sabbath. So from the time we wake up on Saturday to the time the sun sets, no social media. So you remind yourself, on Sabbath, I'm not checking social media. You may say things like meal times. All my meal times, I want to interact with my friends, I want to be with my family, I'm not going to check my phone. You need to recreate boundaries and say, this is the time for social media, this is the time I spend with my friends, this is the time I work, I go to school, etc. So you'll need to recreate some boundaries and hold yourself accountable. What happens if you say on Sabbath, I'm not using social media, but there you are in church scrolling? Hello? Yeah, we do that in church, right? There are going to be consequences. And you may have to, and this is where, being mature and being honest with yourself and say, okay, I broke my rule. I used social media in church today. I'm banning social media for the rest of the week. So actually, not punishing yourself, but give yourself consequences. If you made yourself a rule and say, I'm only using social media 2 hours every day, what happens if you exceed that amount? Give yourself consequences. I've had to take social media fasts, and this has helped me a lot. Fasting is not just food. You can actually fast from social media. So for example, the longest fast I've taken is about 6 months of social media. I went on Facebook, deactivated my account. I got off Twitter, I got off Instagram. You couldn't find me on social media because I was fasting. I was actually praying about it and saying, God, this thing I need to break from. And you can take a fast. You can say 1 month I'm off Facebook. 1 month I'm off this. Or however long you need, just to get that clarity and that freshness to allow you to move on with life. So you can fast and take off. Take off notification sounds, like those ping, especially for Facebook, ping, every time you have a notification, ping. Maybe that sound is what is making that addiction continue. So take off those sounds. You can actually do it on your phone. We've talked about time. Other things we can do that you have to be aware of. Using phones while driving, that is, in countries, for example, let me give the US for example, you can actually get a fine for using your phone while driving. In other countries, you can actually get a ticket for using your phone while driving. Countries are actually outlawing using phones while driving. Why? Because it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. You can't drive a car and be on social media at the same time. Your attention, and I know some people are like, no, but I'm a multitasker, I can do it, I'm a man. No, they've actually found out that people can get in accidents, people can, you're not in control of the car. You cannot look at the road and look at the phone at the same time. So please, I know in Kenya it's kind of relaxed and we're relaxed with each other, but please, for the safety of other drivers, for the safety of all of us, don't use your phone while driving. or operating any vehicle or operating a machine. It's extremely dangerous. It becomes a weapon that the enemy can use to destroy us. You can ban use in certain places. If you're a businessman or a businesswoman, if you own a business and you have internet service, you can actually talk to your internet service provider and you can actually block certain sites so that your employees, when they come into work, when they try to go on Facebook, the site won't come up. So you can actually, and I know there's some workplaces, all social media, they block them. So when you go online, you try to go online or you try to use the Wi-Fi, you can't go. So employers, you can think about putting some restrictions and saying, I need my workers to work. I don't want my workers to be on Facebook from morning to the evening. I mean, what are you paying them for? You can actually go to your internet service provider and they can block certain sites to keep us safe. I don't even want to go into the topic of gaming because that will go over time. We need to be careful as a society. This gaming thing, betting thing, this is an addiction. If your young person is betting, he's getting into an addictive behavior. It's just like gambling, but it's online. We need to be careful about it. If your youth is unemployed, try to find other activities or things they can do. Betting is an addiction. It is an addiction, just like anything. So be careful. Know the games that your children are playing. Know the content. We didn't even talk about pornography, but all that stuff is there. We didn't even talk about bullying and suicide. There are some sites, there are some people online who actually help people commit suicide, and we've had cases like that here in Kenya. People meeting people online, like human traffickers, sex traffickers, drug traffickers, all that stuff is online. Everything you can possibly think of, but we're Christians, so we don't think bad things. But every bad thing you can think of is online. So as a parent, what can you do? Parental controls. Parental controls. If you have a computer, if you have an iPad, if you have a phone, you can put parental controls on all your devices. Make sure your children are safe at home. They're not going to sites, they're not interacting with traffickers online, things like that. You can put those safety controls on your devices. Another thing, talk about it. Talk about it with your children. You know, when they're joining these sites and everything, have a conversation with your child as to how they can keep themselves safe. Let me talk about trafficking for a minute. Kidnappers, abusers, you know, all those types of people, they'll enter sites, they'll enter chat rooms, and they'll try and find young people online that they can lure, they can kidnap, they can do all these kinds of things, right? You want to know the kinds of friends your children are making online. Are they real people? Do you know them? Do you know their parents? If they're interacting with strangers, you don't know. That could be someone who can come and take your child, or they can agree to meet somewhere. All kinds of, I've had every kind of story you can think of. It's dangerous, it's real. Don't just think it's because it's in a screen your child is safe. No. You don't know what they're talking about, and you don't know how that person may be endangering your child, and it has real life consequences in terms of meeting people and injuring people, even killing people. It has real time consequences. So you want to know the friends your children are making online, you want to know the content that they're talking about, and you want to be free about it as well. Okay, so is there any other question about internet or social media addiction? Anyone can change, anyone can get over it. And I've given us some practical things that we can look at. Is there any question about the online world or social media or the internet? Yes.
Mike is here.
My question is, how much of a factor is advertising or advertisers on social media addiction and addiction to the internet?
Excellent question. I want to say this, that nothing you ever do online is private. Nothing you ever do. Now there's a big case going on with privacy and Facebook. The truth is, all these social media platforms, and Facebook is just one case, but all of them, they are taking your information, they're taking your data, they're taking your profile, and they're selling it to marketers and advertisers, and that's how they're making their money. When you go on Facebook, do you pay a fee? How do they make their money? It's through advertisers. So that's how they make that's their model. That's their economic model. They try and get so much information about you, your gender, your age, where you come from, what you like, what pages you follow. All this information, they have a whole data set about you. Then they go to advertisers and marketers. They sell that information. And if you notice, when you go online, and let's assume you're looking for shoes, what happens the whole day? Do you see ads about shoes the whole day and you're wondering, how do they know I was looking for shoes? Yes? That's how it works. Yeah, that's how it works. So we're talking about privacy. Don't post personal information online. No one online needs to know where you live. Don't put that information online. Things about your ID number, your workplace, even your relationships, that needs to be personal. And if you put it online, I'm guaranteeing you, it's being sold somewhere. Somewhere, US, Russia, China, that's how they're making their money, out of you. And you're not getting a single shilling. So that is the world of advertising. That's how they make their money. And that's why we need to be careful the kind of information we're putting online. Any other question about the internet, social media? Yes.
My question is, how do you strike a balance between wanting out from the social media, at the same time, maybe you are employed and you're communicating via WhatsApp or via email? So how do you strike a balance?
Okay. If you notice, the whole time I've been up here, I've not said social media is bad. Yes? It's good, it's beneficial, but there are certain things we need to be aware of. So I am not an advocate of never use Facebook, because that's not even practical. I'm not an advocate of you should never use social media, because that's not practical. I began this talk by saying this is the world we're living in. Therefore, as the Bible says, we should be in the world, but not what? Of the world. So this is the world we live in. Now, boundaries is what is going to save us. Amen? Boundaries. If, for example, and this used to be the case with me because my background is communication, you're being paid to run a social media account, or your social media manager, for example, that is your job. You must do your job. But we're going back to boundaries. If you have to be on Facebook in the workplace, you've used your time. Guard your personal time and say, that's what I do for a living, but when I come home, I'm not looking at my gadgets. I need to protect my personal time and not have social media in that time. Sabbath. And we're Seventh-day Adventists. Sabbath. When God is telling us to rest, He's not saying rest physically. No, it's resting emotionally, resting mentally. How can you rest if you're on Facebook the whole day on Sabbath? You're not resting. So, again, we have to be selfish. This is my time. This is God's time. This is my marriage time. This is my family time. You say, no, Sabbath, I'm not on social media. Why? Because I need time with God, I need time with my relatives, I need time with my family, and you're not having that time if you're on social media. So you need to be aggressive. This is my time. How am I using it? Who needs it? And if social media is all over the place, you need those boundaries. You need those boundaries. Our time is almost up. Is there a burning question before we end? Social media, internet addiction. I want to end with this verse because I like to end with a high note. And this is Philippians chapter 4, verses 13. And we all know this, but I'm going to read it from the Contemporary English Version, CEV. Philippians 4:13, it says this. It says, Christ gives me the strength to face anything. Amen? Or in King James Version, it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Pray about it. God is really, really concerned about how we utilize our time. Don't think this is a thing that is outside your Christianity. This may be the issue that the Holy Spirit is saying we need to deal with. So pray about it. Go to God and say, am I using my time wisely? Do I have addiction to social media and the internet? And the Bible says Christ will give you the strength to deal with it. Parents, If your child, and I see a lot of parents here, and I know a lot of our parents, we're just giving our phones to our children, giving iPads to our children. You're dealing with a really sticky ground. Soon enough, you're literally raising an addict. You're literally raising an addict. Don't reach a point and start saying, Ati, you can't remove that from them, or you can't take that iPad from them. The Bible says Christ can give you strength to deal with what? With your children. And if you're raising addicts, He'll give you the wisdom and the strength to be able to help your children be good stewards of their time and safe online, because that's all we want. Okay?